What do you think when you hear the word politics? You might think of CNN, Fox News. You might think of particular politicians like AOC or Bernie Sanders or Ron DeSantis or Donald Trump. You might be thinking of the war in Russia. But this book, it doesn't really talk about any of that. But it is a deeply political book. It is a book about the fundamentals of politics, not in a practical tutorial kind of way, but in a way that is explanatory. Because in this book, the author describes how the American Constitution came to be what it is. And he describes how we see it today as something much more than it is, and that, in fact, the mythology surrounding the Constitution and the belief and faith we have in the Constitution and in the glory we give to the founding fathers of America and to the authors of the Constitution, that these are really two separate things, and they should both be destroyed and rewritten, respectively. Nothing that you read in this book will you hear from any contemporary politician or any contemporary political commentator on YouTube or otherwise. This is a book that is completely unique. I don't think there is another book exactly like this, because it is one part political, criticism of the status quo, criticism of the way normal people think of politics. It is one part history, like I said before, about various historical political regimes like in ancient Rome and ancient Greece, and of course the founding of America. And it is one part proposal. It is also one part like case studies. There are 2 long chapters in this book about particular egregious police misconduct that he goes into great depth. That's a very dry part of the book, but I'm not saying it's irrelevant, but it's definitely a shift in tone for the book. So this really is like maybe 3 or 4 books in one that are all driving towards towards a group of messages. One of the most important messages he wants to get across is that we need to disabuse ourselves from the notion that our forebears, politically, in any other sense, are in any way superior to us. So many times in this book, he says, any group of 10 random people could get together and design or author a better constitution than we now have. And at first I was like, I don't know. I don't know about that. I don't think I agree with that. So I think he really underestimates how stupid any group of 10 people can be. But once you go through those 2 dry chapters, delving into the details of how exactly these cases of egregious police misconduct occur and the steps leading up, the steps in the middle, and the aftermath, right? And you see this mechanical miscarriage of justice, of what anyone would call justice. You start to understand how, yeah, any person who has at least 2 brain cells to rub together could, by themselves or with a group of 10 people, figure out a better outcome than what was delivered in those particular court cases. I think my favorite part, or parts of the book, I think it's around chapters 10 and 11, or it's 11 and 12, where Eisel really gets into some ideas about how things could be very different in our society. He talks about the idea of job rotation, of other things that I can't think of off the top of my head. But this one idea, job rotation, okay? It's like, okay, you can think of it in a couple ways. Like, you can think of it as, okay, maybe you work at a school and you can be a teacher, a janitor, the principal, the superintendent, and a student, right? Those are all roles that are within the school. And each role has specific knowledge about the institution that is not shared between the roles. And his idea is that through everyone, as far as is possible, because of course, like, the janitor can't just rotate into being a teacher or into being a principal, but certainly the principal or the teacher can rotate into being a janitor, right? And everyone can rotate into the position of being a student. Through the rotation of staff, through people of all the roles, everyone will come to a greater understanding of the institution itself, and through this process, the institution will be able to be improved. And I think that's a cool idea. I don't know if it'll work, but that's part of the other reason why I appreciate this book, is that there's a sense generally in which he is approaching politics, and there are the specific ways that he might recommend. Like, if we were actually having a debate about how to organize our society, he is recommending certain things. And I don't have to agree with his recommendations, but I can really endorse and appreciate his approach. And also, you could think about rotation not in terms of just in one organization, but between organizations. Maybe you could be a cop for 3 months, then a fireman, then I don't know, a person who picks up trash on the side of the street, And these differing perspectives, or maybe a cop and then a paramedic on the other side, right? Something more contrasting and related. And it's the hope that through these differing perspectives, people will not become so ingrained in their ways, and they will stop identifying totally with their position. A cop only thinks of himself as a cop and not as the dispatcher, not as the person he's pursuing, not as the person he's supposedly serving and protecting, right? And he has no outside view, right? He can't see other cops as anything but himself. But if he were ever put in that position professionally, as a fireman, as a paramedic, as something else, he could have that perspective, and that would change him fundamentally. And I really like that idea. What else? There was one other thing I wanted to say. So yeah, I do recommend it. I recommend this book. What's the last thing I wanted to say? I forget. I remember what I wanted to say that I forgot. And it's really the only point of criticism that I have towards this book and its overall view on how politics works, is that the entire subject of political power is not really discussed. And to me, that's the most important part. How is political power accrued and acquired, exercised, and given to the people or to anyone else? You know, how can you give someone power, right? It's kind of like giving someone sovereignty. It's not really, you know, you can't really do that. Sovereignty can only be taken, right? Real sovereignty. If someone is only sovereign because another country lets them be, is that really sovereignty? And in the same way, if someone has political power because some authority gives it to them, how much power do they really have, you know? And that, I think, is like the big question mark for me, is that, okay, all of these ideas about making society radically more democratic than it is currently is attractive in its way. It's worth a shot, in my opinion, right? Because the democracy described in this book has not been tried in 2,000 years, okay? It's not something we would really think of when you hear the word democracy these days. So yeah, I think that's the big question left unanswered and left unasked in this book, is the nature of power, of political power, and how it's possible to even give it to people, you know? And I think, you know, how technology changes the nature of power, changes the nature of politics itself, you know? The Industrial Revolution didn't just change how easy it was to produce large sums of food. It changed everything else about our daily lives, our political relations, our occupational relations and habits, etc. And this is technology. You know, I think technology is another part that is not really discussed or thought about in this book. And those are things I would be very interested to hear what he has to say about those things. But yeah, I still recommend the book because it teaches you a lot of interesting facts, debunks a lot of stuff that's good and everything. But I think the most important part of the book is that it teaches you a different way to approach politics as a subject, as an area of your life. It's not mired down in the minutia of politics, even though, like I said, of course, it goes into great detail. In some cases, it's not policy wonkery. It's a fresh approach to politics that I would love to see more of going forward. So, thanks to Isel for writing the book. Thanks to you for watching it, or watching this review of the book. Like and subscribe. Later.